In this tutorial we are going to see how to integrate Hibernate and JPA with Spring Boot. So we know that the concept of Hibernate, that we can able to map objects into a relation in the database. Likewise, in Spring Boot we have a concept of JPA. JPA allows us to map the relation between the objects, and we can store the objects into the tables with the help of Hibernate concept. So we know that the database will have the table. The table is otherwise called as relations, and Java will have the objects. And what we can do is we can use the concept of Hibernate and JPA to store the data from objects into tables and vice versa. And this kind of mapping is called as ORM mapping, and ORM stands for object relationship or object relational mapping. So what we can do is we will create some object in Java file, and we can convert, or we can map that Java object into a relation, and we can do it in a vice versa. So what we are going to do is we are going to create some classes, and using that class we will do mapping concept, and we will introduce something called entity, and we can create a primary key when we write a code, and that kind of stuff we will do. So for that what we are going to do is we are going to create something called student class, and this student class will have the ID as the primary key, and name, that is the first name, and the last name as the variables. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a simple program using the concept of the Spring Boot, and we are going to create object for the student, and we are going to map that object into a database. For that database we are going to use in-memory database called H2. So this H2 is an in-memory database which can be used only for the testing purpose. Suppose if you want to create application for a very large application, we can go for something called MySQL and other database stuffs. So for the demonstration purpose we are going to use H2. So likewise we'll start the project. So we are going to start with file, new project, and we are going to use Spring Initializer. Then select default, then click on next, and so the group is com.example. No need to change anything, so I'm going to change the packing as var, and I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to use the dev tools, but I'm not going to use in the programming thing, but when you develop a project we can select this package. Then in web I will be selecting web. In template engine I will be using theme leaf. For SQL I will be using JPA, that is Java Persistent API, and for the database I can use H2. Like I said, H2 is only for the testing purpose. We can go for MySQL or PostgreSQL, SQL Server, and so many things are there. So for the testing purpose in this tutorial I'm going to use H2. So now the dependencies have been selected, so this will be added in pom.xml. So I'm going to select next, and the demo, the project name, I am going to put it as JPA demo. So I'm going to click on finish. So I'm going to disconnect the previous services. So this will start enable the auto import. Then now you can see in pom.xml everything is added, like we know dev tools, then H2 database, and something called a SpringBoot, starter tomcat, etc. So in the src we'll have main. In that main we have Java, then com.example.demo, like that. So I'm going to create a model. So to represent that I'm going to create a package called model. So inside that model I'm going to create something called student class. So So now what I'm going to do is, this is an ordinary class, the class name is student. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a ID for student. So private long is the data type, and ID I'm going to give, and I'm going to give private f name for first name, then private string is the data type. Then I'm going to use private string l name. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the concept of JPA. So what JPA will consider is so this student is a class, but in JPA we will call this as entity. So using the annotation we can use entity. So select that, it will automatically include the package javax.persistence.entity. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to store this information in a database directly without creating any queries for creating tables. For that I'm going to use this ID as the primary key and other f name or other attributes. So if I want to specify this as the primary key, I can use annotation called ID. So I can use the annotation called ID, and this ID is a persistence one. Sorry. Yeah, this ID is again it comes under the package import javax.persistent.id, and we know that I'm going to I'm not going to get a primary key value from the user, and I'm going to generate I'm going to auto generate this. So to auto generate that, there is something called generated value annotation. So it also comes under javax.persistence, so I'm going to use that. So the next step is, once this is created, the next step is we have to create the constructor for this student. So because when you use constructor, JPA will be happy and it will create a background process for us. So the main thing is I'm going to create a constructor. So click on generate, and you can have a option called constructor, and I'm going to select the class and I'm going to generate. So constructor is generated, and for this attributes I'm going to create a setters and getters. So right click there and click on generate, and you can see something called as getter and setter. Click on that, select the attributes. So I'm going to generate it for everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select generate setter and select everything, then click on OK. So now it will create getters and setters for all the things. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a toString method for this because when I call this toString method, it will retrieve everything from the methods like get f name, get l name, get id, etc. So generate and select toString method. So select OK. So now everything is ready, and so this is like a model. We know that we can create a student class with id, f name and l name as the attributes, but when it comes under JPA, what we can do is we can consider student as the entity. That is, it will consider this as the table. There is a student table, and we have a first attribute id, and which is of type primary key, and other f name is the second attribute, and the third l name will be the third thing. So when it creates a table, it will create a table with the name student with 3 columns id, f name and l name. So we have created a model. So now this JPA will create a table for us. So before creating a table, what we have to do is we have to create a repository for that. So to create a repository, I'm going to create another package called repository. So the main purpose of repository is to manage this kind of objects. So we have created the content, or we have created the object of student. So using this we are going to add some content into the table, or you can retrieve something, and that is possible with the help of the repository. So right click and select, so this repository is of interface type, so I'm going to use Java class, and I'm going to type the name as student repository, and I'm, instead of selecting the class, and I'm going to select the interface, select OK, and by default this repository will extends something called JPA repository, and in this repository we have to give two things. One is the name of the repository. This student repository is belongs to the class student, so we have to give student here. We have to give student here, and this student will have something called a primary key ID, and what we have to give, the second parameter is we have to give the data type for that ID. So the data type is long. That's it. So what we did is we have just created a repository, but what we can do with the help of repository is when we do like so when we click on this JPA repository, it will go to the JPA repository class, where we can do all stuffs like save, find all, everything. So we can see find all here. So similarly this JPA repository extends something called paging and sorting repository, or query by example executor, everything. So if you want to explore more thing, now what we can do is press Ctrl and click on this classes. You can explore this. Yeah, so I have clicked the paging and sorting repository. That extends something called CRUD repository, where CRUD stands for create, read, update and delete. And again I'm going to explore this. Now you can see another some other methods like save and everything. So using this JPA repository we can do such kind of stuffs. And so we have just created the entity, and we have created the repository for entity, and we have not added any data into it. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a model, or we are going to create a table in a H2 database. For that in H2 database we can directly first we can run this. So first just run this. So it's starting the SpringBoot. Yeah. So now we'll explore localhost :8080. Yeah, it's thing. And to view this H2 in memory database, what we can do is there is an option called application.properties. In this application.properties we can type spring.h2.console.enabled equal to true. If we set that, we can view that with the help of this thing like H2 console, and this will open the H2 console for us. And you make sure that this JDBC URL, it will be like JDBC:/H2:MEM:testDB, and username is SA, and password I am not going to give anything. So just click on test connection and click on create, So what happen is it will create a table for us. So if I just select run, it will create id, f name and l name for us. So id is a primary key and other thing or other attributes. So what we can do is we can insert the content into the student. I'm going to insert some primary key as like 1 2 3 and f name as some name and l name as some name. So what we can do is we can create a script here. So what I can do is I can right click on resources and select new file and type data.sql. So this data.sql is a script file which enable us to insert some content. So the command is insert into the table name is student followed by values. So I'm going to insert some content. 1 2 3 is my id, which is a primary key, and followed by some name. For example, first name is Arul and the second one is last name is Suju, and we'll just check this. So when you do this, when you execute this demo application, it automatically calls this data.sql and it will insert. But in real time they won't use this data.sql. Instead they will use something called as services. So with the help of services they will store everything into a table, and that we will see in the next tutorial. So just I'm going to run this. So run demo.application, starting. Oh, there is some problem. There is some problem. Everything seems to be correct. Insert into student values. Oops, there is an error. Yeah, so instead of single quote put double quote. I think this is the problem. So we'll just check, save it. So open demo application, right click and run the demo application. Yeah, now it's fine. So now I'm going to do that. So /h2 console, click on test connection, connect. Now if I click on the student, click on run, yeah, so the id is added, f name is added and l name is added. So in this tutorial we have seen how to create the entity and how to create a primary key with the help of id and generated value, and how to create a repository for the entity, and how to create a script so that when it executes, it automatically insert the content into the table. Like I said, this h2 database is only for the demo purpose or testing purpose. We should not use this h2 database for a very large application, and in the next videos we will see how to insert this content in the program itself. What we'll do is we'll create a service. Using that service, we'll insert this kind of content into the table automatically, and that's it. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to this video.